Right, so first of all, grab your front panel of your dress, which is this weird looking shape here. This is your front of your bodice here, and then the rest of it, as you'll see, is the front of the skirt. So we're going to sew the darts first, so you'll have a mark where the point of the dart is, and then here, let's bring this up closer, you've got your a cut here, and then there'll be another cut just there. Match those up, then pinch where your chalk mark is, showing you where the end of the dart goes, and you're basically going to stitch your dart along there. Continue for another centimetre after the chalk mark. I'm starting at the wide end of the dart, and it's just worth mentioning here that how to stitch a dart is on your glossary, on your bullet points. I'm using as well, just to say, I'm using a contrast thread for two reasons, partly because I just love that kind of detail in my sewing, and also it's easier for you to see while I'm teaching, but obviously if you want to use a matching thread, of course, by all means you do that. So starting with a back stitch and then stitching all the way to the end of the dart. Make sure you come off right off the fold of the fabric, otherwise you end up with a little bubble at the end of your dart. As you can see, the dart wants to go down towards the waist line. So we're going to press that. I'm going to top stitch mine in this red thread. So top stitching, we usually do about 1 millimetre or 2 away from the actual seam. Carry on all the way to the point of the dart. And then a back stitch. Now take your sleeve pieces. The back is this one with the split in, which is for the cuff. And then obviously this is the front. This seam here is your top shoulder seam. I've just put 4 pins in here. I hope you've noticed the matching notches there to help you match these seams up at the raw edges. And then also there's notches at the beginning which indicate your seam allowance, which is 1 centimetre, and then just go all the way down to the bottom of the sleeve. Whiz down there with your overlocker or do a zigzag. This fabric is stable enough for it to handle being right on the edge. So as you can see there. Grab your bias binding strip. You've got one long strip to serve both sleeves, so just chop that in half. So we're going to bind this edge here. It's a bit fiddly. I've got my sleeve wrong side up. Start stitching a foot's width from the edge. We're still sort of similar distance here on the edge here. I'm going to start to bring over the binding, so that there's my snip. I'm heading for about there, centimetre up, and about here on the binding. Now, with your needle down, okay, lift up the foot and grab your scissors and just try not to cut the binding. You're just going to snip up. We're aiming to get this now to do that. And it won't if your fabric is not snipped. And then basically carry on back down the other side. This is now on the right side of your sleeve. There's our seam. Fold the outer edge to meet the edge of the seam. Fold the whole thing over so that the folded edge here matches where your stitches are but goes slightly over. So keep going up, start to prepare the top point, and then this will neatly come round there. Every time you're sort of fiddling around with bits of fabric, it's worth just putting the needle down so that your sewing isn't moving around too much. We're aiming to just sew this in a nice straight line. And now we're down the other side. I'm going to sew across there like that. Just go straight across and then back to where you started. Turn this back to the right side. That's just happily just sitting there like that. I've done a little stay stitch here as well, just to remind me before I put this to one side that that is the way that the binding goes. We're going to sew all the raglan seams now, which is why this is called the raglan dress. So take your sleeves, front raglan seam to front raglan seam here, match up your notches and pin, match up and pin the other one on. So this is the first out of 4 raglan sleeves, 2 at the front, 2 at the back. So I've matched that up. Your notches obviously indicate your seam allowance, so this is going to be a closed seam. Again, a closed seam is a little diagram on your bullet points, so take a look at that. Right round to what would be the underarm edge here, and then zigzag the edge just like I did on the top seam here of the sleeve. All 4 raglan seams are going to be closed seams like this. Let's take your facing pieces now. We're going to do the neck edge. So this is the back facing, front facing. These are the shoulder seams. Can you see the notches there? That's where it needs, the edges need to match. Press the shoulder seams open. You're going to press under 1 centimetre all the way around the outer edge of your facing. It's really hard to press this under once it's attached to the dress. Take your dress. Here's our facing. The shoulder seams then match up with your shoulder seams on your sleeve. There's notches all the way around now for you to match up the raglan sleeves. So this is my neck edge. I've pinned my facing onto the dress and I'm going to sew the facing on 1 centimetre seam allowance. Just worth mentioning as well here that all my seams are, my raglan seams are going into the sleeve. While I'm here, I'm just going to flip it over like this and I'm going to understitch the whole facing. So I'm going to pull this over. The seam allowance is still going in that direction, so everything gets stitched down. Press it to the wrong side and then we're going to pin it down. And work your way all the way around. So now we're going to top stitch the facing down. Very satisfying. Make sure that this is laying nice and flat as you go round. Actually move the dress around. So this is the underarm seam and this is the side seam of the bodice. We're just going to sew up both side seams with a closed seam, so a straight stitch and a zigzag. Cuffs. It's time to get the cuffs on. So take your 2 rectangular pieces and as you can see I've already pressed under the 2 long edges according to the notches, so it's 1 centimetre tucked under. Okay, that's going to be your best friend when you come to sew this on to the sleeve. So then sort of fold it back right sides together. Just going to flatten out the bits you've just pressed just for a minute and we're going to just sew up the short ends. 1 centimetre seam allowance. Keep these flat. And then we're just going to press that all back under. Then we attach this to the wrong side of the sleeve. Now the matching points are basically this edge matches to that edge and it comes all the way around here, and then this edge matches there. So I've matched up the raw edges, I've pulled out the pressed under bit, and I've matched up the edge of this seam to the edge of the bit of bias binding there. I'm going to try and get a pin in there. I'm going to go all the way around to the other side here, pin in there, and then pin around the rest. 1 centimetre seam allowance, and then sort of back stitch into where I want to start, which is there. Right, now then the rest is fairly straightforward. So it's basically you're going round the sleeve, basically in the fold that you pressed. So I've now folded the sleeve back to the right way round, and this is the right side of the sleeve. And joy of joys, it all fits, and this is the really lovely fun finishing bit where we get to top stitch this edge down. Here's the stitch from before. I'm just coming to that point and then slightly over and sewing as near as you can to the edge. There we go. And then just before we get to that final bit, I'm just going to tuck in, just in case there's a bubble, tuck that in, back stitch there, and that is your cuff. I just love sewing, so satisfying. Okay, so we're on to the pockets. As you can see, I've already stitched the pockets, 4 different pockets to the side seams of the back, and this is the front panel. So what I've done is a straight stitch, 1 centimetre in from the edge, and then I've zigzagged the edge just where the pocket is. And now I'm going to press all of the pockets towards the side seam, with the seam going that way as well. Take your back panel and your front skirt panel and lay them right sides together, and you'll see that they match up perfectly. Pin all of those edges together. Right, I've taken my seam allowance to just over a centimetre, actually, even 1.5 centimetres. You'll see why when we come to the pocket. So it's just straight stitch from, this is the top edge of the skirt where it's going to join onto the bodice. So going to just go straight down until we reach the pocket. And as you can see, this is why my seam allowance is slightly wider, because I want to come onto the outside of this bit where the pocket's attached. So come down until you think you've got the right seam allowance to turn and go around the pocket. So needle down and pivot round, and then we're just going to go all the way around this pocket. So at this point, follow the contour of the pocket here. So rather than come up in a straight line and then go down, it's much more comfortable on your hands going into your pocket if we just round off that edge there until we end up coming out of the pocket on a bit of a horizontal line. Again, go just over the seam of the pocket, couple of stitches, which should take you to about 1.5 seam allowance. Needle down, turn, and then carry on straight down to the bottom hem of the skirt. And zigzag around that whole seam. Right, now we're ready to start getting the skirt attached to the bodice. So take your dress, which is all now in one piece, and here I'm at the slit where the bodice, here's the skirt on the front panel, okay? Make sure the threads on your machine are really long because you're going to need those to pull the gathering up. We're going to do 2 rows of gathering stitches. So set your stitch length to the longest it will go. And don't backstitch because you're going to want to draw these threads up. You're going to go all the way around, cross the side seam, and the side seam goes forward because you want your pockets to sit forward. And then we're going to come right round till we get back to the other slash on the other side of the bodice. Now go back to where you started the last row. Lay your foot on the edge of the stitch you've just done. That should give you enough room. So again, another row all the way round. So this is where it all really starts to come together. Here's our bodice and here's the skirt. The skirt obviously now has to be gathered up to fit this. Take 2 of the threads on the same side and start gathering this in. You best use a polyester thread as well because there's more give. So this is my side seam here. It's already beginning to look like that's about the right amount of gather, but obviously we've got to go all the way round the back of the skirt. So take your gathering, the bunching up all the way round the back, pull in from this side too, start working my way around the other side until it all begins to fit. So I'm going to turn the bodice inside out and stuff it inside the skirt. So I've got my side seam here. Put your pins this way up. You can gather past them. There's a centre front and a centre back on the skirt that you can match up the side seams there. Feel your way around. You'll be able to feel if there's more gathers in one place than another. So make sure they're evenly spread. There's a bit flat there. And then start pinning on the gathered side upwards like this. Just pop your pins in, sort of poke the pin in on one row of stitches and have it come out on the other side like that. I've got the flat bit of the front panel here. Now it has to start like a dart. So you literally start about 1 centimetre away from the snip, and we're going to start right on the edge of the fold and come in very gently. Set your stitch length back to 2.5 to 3. And and just to show you before I take this pin out, just to secure the gathering, I've just done like a figure of 8 around that pin, just to stop it. You can tie it off, tie the threads off, but that is less permanent. Going to start stitching and then back stitch off the edge and then come back in, and as you can see it's just like a dart. So we're sliding into, that can come out now, we're sliding into the gathering in between the sort of the tram lines of the gathering and keep going until you're about 1.5 centimetres away from the edge. You want to sew right in between the 2 rows of gathering stitches. So I've just come right back round to the other side of this flat panel on the front. I'm aiming for here, so I'm going to slightly start to turn in that direction. You want it to be a gradual, very gradual dart, so you don't get a tuck. And go then right off the edge, and then just do your little back stitch on the fold there, and you're done. Zigzag that whole raw edge, or overlock of course. So while I'm doing this, go and try yours on, and then we'll press under and then hem. You can also pull out this gathering stitch. Pull your gathering stitch out on the same side that you gathered it, and then once you've got that top stitch out, you can just go to the back. Let's find the back, and then this piece will just come out all in one go. So I've pressed under my 1 centimetre and my 3 centimetres and pinned down the hem. I'm just going to go all the way round. If you want to use your contrast thread here, it looks quite nice, contrast colour, or just go with the matching thread. Try and keep your stitch right on the edge. Buttonholes. Buttons.